All right, good evening. I call this meeting to order.
Good evening, everyone. We have a counselor, Vice Mayor Sina McGill, who would like to electronically participate pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3708.2. Vice Mayor McGill, are you on the line?
I am.
Okay, and is your electronic participation tonight due to a medical condition?
I believe so.
And are you currently at your residence in the city of Charlottesville, Virginia?
I am.
Okay. If I could have a motion from a counselor to allow Ms. McGill to participate via electronically.
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I.
Okay.
All right, next we have so do we have to read anything in particular? Okay. So we're acknowledging that we're deviating from our standard council meeting procedures for public participation. We do have a webinar. You can view us on Facebook Live, and then we have the regular Channel 10 viewing.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Thomas, roll call, please.
Mr. Payne,
Here.
Mr. Snook,
Here.
Ms. Walker,
Present.
Ms. McGill,
Here.
Ms. Hill. Here.
Is there a motion for approval of the agenda?
With a couple of things taken out, is that right? Or is this agenda that we've got here reflect those things that have been taken out?
We're just
Yes.
approving this. We do have some other business items. And then we can still at consent or and during other business discuss other matters.
As it's been printed here, I move its approval.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, any announcements?
I think there's a couple here. You're a hunger hero. We gratefully recognize the City of Charlottesville Commissioner of Revenue for collecting enough food and funds to provide 266 meals for your neighbors in need. This is from the Blue Ridge area. Also, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Commissioner of Revenue, Treasurer, and Utility Billing will all be closed to walk-in traffic until April 1st. As always, tax filings and payments can be made via U.S. mail, online, or at any of the drop boxes located on 6th Street, 7th Street, or the drive-up box by the Key Recreation Center. Online payment options are also available at the Treasurer and Commissioner of the Revenue pages of the city's website. These departments will still be available by telephone or email for all inquiries. Please visit the department pages on the city website for more information or contact numbers and email.
Okay, are there any other announcements?
The only thing I'm just going to relay is that we will not be appointing boards and commissions tonight.
Okay.
Right.
All right, I have one announcement. Local journalists Jordy Yeager and Margot Balka, on behalf of Willow Tree, have been working with community organizers, area nonprofits, and others to set up a new centralized website called Support Seville. The site is a one-stop hub for people to find and navigate the many ways, big and small, that people can help their community members by donating money, their time, and other supplies to those most impacted and most in need through the on-the-ground resources already doing this work. Support Seville is also a one-stop site that collects all the different ways people can request local funding and help with their day-to-day as well as other supplies. The site address is supportseville.com, and Jordy encourages people to use the contact form there to suggest new content they can link to. Any other announcements? All right. We don't have any recognitions, and we're not appointing to boards and commissions. So, Ms. Thomas, could you read the consent agenda, please?
Consent agenda A, minutes, January 28th, City Schools Budget Work Session, March 2nd, special and regular meetings, March 5th, budget work session. B, appropriations, skate park lighting donations, $47,540, second reading. C, appropriation, transfer to the Historic Resources Committee funds to the examination of possible burials near the Gilmer Craven Hotop Cemetery at Penn Park, $3,500, second reading. D, resolution, Harris Street Apartments, special use permit, second reading. E, resolution, reallocation for asset management system, $1,250,367, one reading. F, resolution, landlord risk reduction fund, one reading. G, resolution, amendment to Charlottesville Supplemental Rental Assistance Program agreement, one reading. H, resolution, street name change, Levy Garrett, one reading. Resolution, approval to apply for Safe Routes to Schools grant, one reading. J, resolution, Star Hill Vision Plan extension, one reading.
Okay. And I would like for us to just vote on D separately.
Okay.
Do we need a motion?
We need to ask the public.
Oh, yes. Are there anyone from the public that would like to comment on any item from the consent agenda? Any online? Brian? No? Okay. All right.
So we're making a motion to
Motion.
adopt the consent agenda with exception to item D for a separate vote.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Please vote.
Ms. McGill, your vote?
Oh, you know what? I pushed her button by accident. We need to hear from you, Sina.
The consent agenda?
Yes.
Yes, minus
Yeah.
item D.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I screwed it over to give some space.
So that carries 5-0.
And I move to adopt the resolution for the Harris Street Apartment special use permit.
I'll second that also.
All right. And I just want to make my comment again that I think while I understand that there are, that we need housing in the city, I think that approving an SUP without them making any commitment to assist in some of the major areas of concern that we have with housing is a challenge for me. Also, them being able to utilize the acreage the Habitat store sits on to increase the number of units that they can build. I think that is probably that's why questions or comments?
No.
Do that again. Need to wake up. Okay, please vote again. Thank you, Mr. Blair. Councilor McGill?
I voted no.
Okay. So that carries 3-2. All right, next up, we have the city manager's response to the community matters from the March 2nd council meeting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, City Council, and the public. Good evening. The first item I want to bring up is Councilwoman McGill talking about the drainage plan for the cemetery. I told you I'll get back to you. That was pertaining to, at this time, Parks and Recreation as well as utilities. It was a groundwater issue as a result of a natural spring. So that's that. On parking permit. That's something that I'm going to have to bring back to the council. Budget session following. The last item that I want to talk about is question was asked. Police personnel, construction companies, gentleman from the police department asked about the construction police department. We currently provide them with weekly updates where we are in the construction process. So we continue to do that. I know we've been moving paper to provide construction projects provide to the police department. One last thing I just wanted to read that wanted to provide to the community pertaining to the virus, this epidemic that we're dealing with right now, COVID-19. One is earlier today, the Virginia Department of Health, Jefferson Health District, announced that a resident of the city of Charlottesville had tested positive for the 2019 novel coronavirus, COVID-19. This marks the first case in the Thomas Jefferson Health District. Positive case is an individual in their late 50s, and it appears to be a travel-related infection. In an effort to contain and mitigate the coronavirus, the city of Charlottesville will begin operations on tomorrow, Tuesday, March 17th, 2020, with essential personnel. The staffing plan will be in effect for at least the next 2 weeks, and we will reevaluate it on Sunday, March 29th, 2020. The public is encouraged to use all available online and telephonic options for conducting business in City Hall, and this is the use of paid drop boxes on both sides of City Hall, and the drive-through box located between the City Hall Annex and the Key Recreation Center. We ask that all in-person transactions be curtailed unless absolutely necessary. That's one thing I want to make clear, that we have stopped the person-person contact in terms of customer service operations throughout the city. Also, too, with the Neighborhood Development Services team, that will be accessible to the public needing to conduct essential business with that department through the Market Street entrance building. We will also be coming back with the plan to reduce the hours that we will be in the years moving forward. So we will provide that information to the public.
Next, we have community matters. And first up, we have Mr. Shackleton.
What's going on, nonetheless? somehow we got off track. In the 1950s, Charlottesville City Council started talking about doing housing for low-income residents. They talked about putting one in Belmont and one in the Black neighborhood. By the time it came about in the 1960s, whites got homes in Belmont and blacks got South Turner. The city didn't know that they were awakening a sleeping giant, public housing, on the residents of Charlottesville. For 65 years, the city has been funding CRHA with funds under the table while the private sector gets the rest of the food on the South Turner. For the last year, the residents of Crescent Halls have attended meeting after meeting about the renovation of our building. Tell us that about $17 million will be needed for renovation. We are giving you our ideas, hoping things are going to be different. It's not going to. Instead, it's the same old same. We ask for walk-in tubs, you say no, but we're going to give you a kitchen. We say we want to return to the same unit after renovation. You say no, that's not going to happen. We ask you to make sure you use top quality materials for renovation. But you're going to say no to that also. It's got to be.
And I just want to just respond. I don't know. I know the material conversation that it has been conveyed to the contractor to make sure they would use the materials that they would use building any project. So hopefully that is what happens. I remember I remember having a conversation about the tubs, but I don't remember when it ended. And I know the same unit conversation meant that there would be people who would have to move multiple times. And it was trying to prevent that. So, but it's, and the public can't hear you if you want to come up and say that.
Taking people from the 8th floor now and putting them in other apartments in the building. Those floors are renovated.
Yes, I'm aware of the asked what Kathleen was doing it at one time, but Kristen is doing it, trying to figure out how to minimize that. That is a discussion that they have at the redevelopment committee meeting. So that is where that decision is happening. It's not happening at the city level. I mean, I'm aware because I'm on the committee, but it's not any decision that we are making per se.
Well, I understand that, but y'all are all supposed to be government working with government, right? And if people leave Crescent Halls now, that's 1 month. They're going to come back to Crescent Halls. That's 2 months. It's just seems like we always get the short end of the stick. Public housing has always been looked on as a third party.
Are you saying from our standpoint?
I'm just saying from everybody's standpoint, whoever's, not personally y'all, but this is something that started years ago. Until you face the fact of what happened years ago, you're not going to help what's going on.
All right. Next we have John.
I've got it worked out. Compost. After vetting, $2,500 from venture capital realize ROI of up to $75,000. So I'm asking City Council to provide me a $1,000 grant, $75 to the IRS to come and chance partisan farm 501c3 organization. I need the remaining $725 to have the land cultivated and paid for seed plantings so I can launch next month. Justin McKenzie, manager of the city market, is allowing me to work for artisans of the arts center to sell their art in the city market this spring. I can be employed as well by time-served individuals who have artists or farm skills to sell their produce or artwork until city council allows them to do it for themselves. Remember, our produce products are sold for sale. Justin said Todd Brown is now looking for City Council to direct Dr. Ron Richardson to open the 20 acres of park to me for land cultivation and start my composting operation. The second phase farming is launched with success. We can be the White House for the entire county. The efforts will start here. So I can start the Biscuit Run Park with another 80 families this year. Thanks for listening.
Could you tell me how you plan to connect with the individuals who work on these parts of the existing?
Coomer. He said he thought this would be a great program. I talked to Chris Watt. Penn Park, it's our crown jewel.
Okay.
She will participate.
Yeah. Meredith Polson. Anna Stein. Melina.
Mayor Walker, members of council, my name is Mangione.
Joni.
Sorry to correct you.
No, I need to know how to say it.
I am the owner of Mangione's Auto Paint located on West Main Street. I spent 4 years living in a city of Charlottesville, struggling to survive during this challenging time. Those of us that will be most affected from a financial standpoint are in the hospitality industry. Local restaurateurs are taking extreme precautions and shutting their doors to in-house dining or closing altogether. Some of our restaurants in the community will never be able to recover. I, along with other independent businesses, are asking for immediate relief from meals tax forgiveness for February and March, which is coming due this week. What forgiveness of the meals tax would mean specifically to my restaurant is that I If and when we close our doors, there's a very large sector of our population that suffers in other hospitality workers that will not earn as much. Kindly allow us to use this money to keep it directly in the local economy so that we may help our people. We also request that the council consider refunding our meals tax for January 2020 so that we may put that to direct support for staff as well. On a final note, we request that the city suspend the 6% meals tax for a period of time in an effort to stimulate the economy once everything reopens and we return to normal operations. Let the meals tax directly help the community, so I'm responsible for bringing in the revenue. Thank you.
Yeah,
Members of City Council, City Manager, and staff, it is come to my attention that in an effort to boost the business community as it faces swimming negative financials due to the coronavirus outbreak, a number of ideas have been circulating related to meals and lodging tax. I believe you will hear a proposal tonight advocating for forgiveness of the Charlottesville meals tax or lodging tax. You may also hear requests to push back the due dates for these taxes that are normally due on the 20th of every month. Wanted to give you some input on these proposals. Number one, trust taxes like the meals and lodging tax are collected by business operators from their patrons and held in trust and remitted to the local government. These funds should not be commingled with operating funds. The business should not use these funds to cover operating expenses. 2, meals and lodging taxes are paid in the month following the month which they are collected. Obviously, such taxes are in direct reflection of the gross revenue generated in that prior month. It follows then that if business is down, then meals and lodging pay down. Businesses are not expected to remit taxes that were never collected. Pushing back due dates will tempt businesses to use trust tax revenue as operating revenue. This will make the bad situation worse for those businesses who are already struggling. Those taxes will eventually come due, and if unable to pay the arrears, the businesses will find itself in violation of City Code Section 30-286B, where all amounts collected as taxes under this article should be deemed to be held in trust by the seller collecting them until remitted to the city as provided by this article. The wrongful and fraudulent use of such collections other than the remittance of the same as provided by the law shall constitute embezzlement pursuant to Section 18.2-111 of the Virginia Code. We want to avoid this scenario. Having said all that, my office does have some discretion when it comes to late filing and payment of meals and lodging taxes collected. If the report and payment is received on or before it becomes 30 days late, we have some discretion to forgive penalty and interest. It is our intention to be as flexible on this as possible. And if we require further assistance, please to reach out.
and we're not being insensitive. We just, at this point, that's not an avenue that we want to support, but we are definitely hoping that, economic development, the city manager, that we are presented with whatever is possible that we can do, and hoping that federal and state aid comes to be able to assist local businesses. In some way, this is all new to all of us. We're just starting, and we're just trying to figure out how to be supportive to the most vulnerable in our community, and we understand that restaurants and not having people enter it and wait staff, surviving off of tips that don't exist doesn't work, and so it's on our minds, and hopefully we can figure something out, but this route isn't one that the city is at this time going to make a support.
May I have any opportunity to respond to that? Mm-hmm. The time that it'll take for you all to develop a plan of action to take the money that you've added to meals tax where other localities and communities put directly into promoting the hospitality industry, our meals tax goes into the general fund, and by the time that gets back and trickled down back to us, it's going to be too late for a lot of people. People are going to go hungry, and they're already going to be dipping tapping into the city resources wherever they may be. We have an opportunity to take this money at this time and provide it directly back to the staff. Understanding the point about it being a trust fund, we do understand that. We understand that there is money that was collected back in February that we are asking to use now in direct support of that. The community wants to come together and help everybody weather this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Clifford Hall.
My mailing address is the Haven. That's where I receive my mail. What I want to talk about is mentorship, what it should be and what it was for me in the Amway business. Mentorship. Who in here has ever had a mentor? Raise your hand if you've had a mentor. Have you had a multi-millionaire as a mentor who makes $50 million a year? Have you ever had a mentor of his who tries to define your sexuality, tries to define who you date, how you date, when you date? Richard Dickey has done that to me. Tried to define me as being straight or gay, trying to define me, telling me who I am to marry, who I am not to marry. BS. Who wants that mentor? Who wants a mentor that tells you, oh, you have to be gay to get Amway money? Who wants that mentor that tells you, oh, you have to marry this individual or you have to have sex with this individual to get Amway money? That ain't me. And I ain't budging. The Amway Corporation, Rich DeVos, Doug DeVos, I hope you get a copy of this video because I ain't budging 100%. Now, my fiance, Carol Lynn Joyner, has just purchased a home.
So, Mr. Hall, if you could make comments that are related to something related to city business.
City
Or
business, the basic Amway business at platinum level will cover all financial situations that the city are involved with for each individual in the city. Wow. What do I mean by this? The basic platinum level person?
Mr. Hall, do you have
Well,
another
anyway, I've
topic?
spoken and you're hearing this, you're listening to this. If you're part of the Tea Party, you know what I'm coming for.
Okay. All right. Mr. Will?
Mayor Walker, we have 35 people participating in the online webinar, and 5 of them right now have raised their hands to speak. So I'll call on each of them in the order in which they raise their hands.
And thank you for getting this. This is great. So appreciate it.
Let's make sure it works.
Well,
That's right.
I want to say thank
Not
you
too hasty.
beforehand.
Not out of order.
Yes.
So, Molly Cotler, you're live with City Council. Please unmute your microphone. You have 3 minutes.
Hear me? Uh-oh. You can hear me, right?
So should we see?
Molly?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. I'm reading this comment on behalf of Luis, whose broadband internet was not strong enough to support the Zoom call. Can the city clarify in outreach materials about access to assistance that the public charge rule does not take into account city and county administered COVID-19 relief? Even before the pandemic, there was already a public health crisis and families removing themselves from public benefits because they erroneously thought they'd impact their immigration status. Tackling this misinformation is 10 times more important now. So if an immigrant receives city or county government aid during the pandemic, it won't affect their immigrant status. but the conditions in the immigrant community are already such that they assume any government assistance will affect them.
Can we turn the volume up?
Thank you. Okay, David, if you can up the volume on the webinar portion at all, that'd be great. I'm going to pull up the next participant, who is Meredith.
So I didn't really hear Molly, if we could hear that again.
And I know Molly was reading a statement, and if she could email that to me, I'll share it with council.
So you think it's a case where people online could hear and at home and just not us? Okay.
I could.
Meredith, you're online with City Council. Please unmute your microphone, and you have 3 minutes.
Sorry, is this for me? My Skype restarted, or my Zoom restarted.
Yes.
Thank you, sorry. My name is Meredith Colson, and I am a resident of Brown Street. I live at 608 Brown Street. I am a homeowner on Brown Street, and my husband is a small business owner in Charlottesville. I'm speaking today about parking on Brown Street. Parking is limited but doable currently. It is limited because construction workers from the Quirk Hotel and other construction sites on Main Street park there, and daily commuters park there. The city is considering adding no parking at the top of both sides of Brown Street because the street is very narrow, and the fire department has cited the street as a hazard for emergency vehicles. However, I would request instead that the city widen Brown Street instead of adding no parking. The street is very narrow, and it has drainage issues during heavy rains at the bottom of the hill. The sidewalk often floods up to the stairs of my house. The street itself needs to be fixed instead of just adding signs. The city could do this since City Yard runs the length of Brown Street. No parking signs are band-aids on the safety issue, which will only end up hurting homeowners on Brown Street when daily commuters and construction workers park at the bottom of the hill instead of the top of the hill. The city traffic engineers have posted this request for no parking comments at the top of the hill at the beginning of March. This is right after the end of the February deadline to submit petitions for parking permits for the rest of the street for 2020. Therefore, I could not get a parking permit added to my street or petition for that until 2021. If this no parking is implemented instead of widening the road, or alternatively being able to petition for parking permits for the rest of the street before next year, my husband and I will not be able to park at our home or even on our street since we don't have a giveaway. We also have neighbors who park on the street who will lose their spots to these daily commuters and the construction workers. Let's keep existing city parking, widen Brown Street, and fix the drainage issue instead of adding no parking signs to Brown Street. Thank you.
And what flexibility there is with timelines. I do know there is an annual cycle for that, but I can see the frustration of there being like a whole year delay for the option for permitted parking, in addition to the other points that were raised by the commenter.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that in the morning when we do our recap from tonight's meeting and provide you with the answer at the next meeting.
Okay, just a second. Lindsay Daniels, you are on the webinar with council. Please unmute your microphone. You have 3 minutes.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello?
Hear you.
Can't tell if you can hear me or not.
Yes.
Let's see.
And see you.
Can everyone hear and see me?
Yes.
There we go. All right. Hi. Sorry, this is my first time having to do this from home, obviously. All right. My name is Lindsay Daniels. I am a resident of the city of Charlottesville, and I work in 3 small businesses in town, including one restaurant on the UVA corner. Many of my close friends own restaurants in Charlottesville also. If city council expects restaurants to pay meals tax towards the general fund right now, when we have been forced to close our doors, then it does seem insensitive and unrealistic. This has really not only to do with the employees, but also the owners themselves who are unable to operate their businesses, unable to pay their rents, unable to pay any bills that are currently outstanding for product that's in the restaurant and they're unable to sell. And not to mention that they're forced to let go of employees who they will have to end up rehiring later. The employees can apply for unemployment, but what can the owners do? Right now, there's just loans, and that's just creating more debt. We can't even apply for an insurance claim until a public health authority officially closes the restaurant, which hasn't happened yet. Every day, we're losing thousands of dollars in every restaurant that has to close. Most are highly seasonal, and the money that we make in certain times carries us through other times. Money on the corner from March Madness through graduation is the money that carries most of the restaurants on the corner through until August. Now that's gone. Without any sort of serious relief, many businesses will be forced to close. I strongly urge you to consider the tax forgiveness proposed by the previous restaurant owner who spoke. I also strongly urge you to publicly declare that any restaurants who are within a mile radius of a confirmed case must close due to exposure to the COVID-19 virus. That would allow these restaurants to file an insurance claim to at least attempt to help in these times. Thank you for your time.
Mayor Walker, that's it for participants at this point.
We're pausing because we're all really just frustrated with the circumstances that we're finding these businesses in. So I'm just, any creative solutions that our staff can come up with to help us maneuver through that and show the support that we all genuinely feel be helpful.
And we've asked for legal advice on this. We've been talking about it through the weekend, so we understand.
And one point that we should make, by the way, Mayor Walker, you were talking about how the city doesn't want to do this. The city actually can't do that. There's a state law, not just a local law. The state law says exactly what the local law says, which is that the funds that have been received in trust. And the state law actually contains the language about embezzlement.
And I understand, believe me, I have family who owns businesses in the locally, and they are being impacted. And so I do, and friends, and I do understand. All right, me. I'm in charge here. So next we have our public hearing on the proposed real estate tax rate for fiscal year 2021. And just before we get started on this, we did talk about whether it would be best to postpone the public hearings to make sure that as many citizens who wanted to could come before us and talk to us. And that's why we had staff look at what other options like the webinar. It has been advised that because this is a just very important part of the process, that we continue with the public hearings, but we are reading every email, and once we know fully what this pandemic will look like locally, if there are opportunities to create a more open meeting and have comments made in the future, we are committed to that. And so we just wanted you all to know that.
It's something we also are flexible, that we recognize that the timeline may not be followed for this budget.
So we may be extending the budget cycle, and again, we don't have those dates at this time, but we want to make sure that the public and our staff are protected, and it's hard to figure out who needs to be where, and so however we can limit contact, we're trying to do that. So that may mean stay on track for the timeline for the budget. So I think we have through June.
Yes. Do you want me to just briefly? The council needs to adopt a budget and appropriation ordinance by June 30th. Legally, starting July 1, the authority has to be in place for the city to spend money starting the next fiscal year. So the absolute last day that the council could adopt the budget is June 30th of 2020 for fiscal year 2021. I think it's fair to say that part of our statutory requirement is to have a public hearing on the budget. And, you know, part of that is tonight, hopefully, if the COVID-19 issue is resolved, council can have a more robust public participation in public hearing, but I think council's doing everything it can tonight with the webinar and this for its public hearing in case there isn't some other opportunity to hold a public hearing between now and June 30th. This is something, though, that it is a state law requirement that there is a public hearing in the budget before the council can adopt its budget and appropriations.
Thank you. All right, so next we have the proposed real estate tax rate for fiscal year 2020. Is that presentation? All right, so we would like to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to speak on the proposed real estate tax rate for fiscal year 2021? One person? Okay. All right, we have one person on the webinar.
Walt Heineke, you are on the webinar with City Council. You have 3 minutes. Yes.
They're too excited about this.
Can you? Thanks. Walt Heineke, 1521 Amherst Street. First, I wanted to say thank you to council for everything you're doing to react to the COVID virus crisis. I have a lot of confidence in your ability to respond to this, and probably more confidence than I have in the White House. I wish we were all collectively in the White House.
Walt, you may need to turn your speaker down.
Okay. On the budget issue, on the tax rate issue, I've been thinking about, first of all, I'm reticent to encourage you to raise taxes, but I've been thinking about this crisis and how it's going to impact different people in our community at different income levels, and it's going to have a differential impact. And I'm starting to think, and I'm curious what you all think about the possibility of going ahead and approving the tax increase to bank that money in case we need to use it for some kind of emergency for income. And I think that takes some thinking in terms of what the impact is of a real estate increase. I know there's a lot of people who are going to be impacted in this community who are service workers and who are renters. And I'm wondering if perhaps have higher income and higher means, as long as tax abatement program is in place to protect those people at the lower end of the spectrum. And I always think that, if we just raise the taxes 2 cents for this year, we can always go back and lower it another 2 cents or another 4 cents later, as we sort of figure out how we're going to deal with the financial impacts of this virus and how it's going to impact low-income people in our communities. So I guess at this point, I'm thinking unless you can, argue for why we shouldn't raise the tax and how it might not be helpful in this particular circumstance that we're facing in terms of budgetary crisis that may be looming, maybe we should be thinking about raising the tax rate. Thanks.
Thank you.
We have another participant. Jason Halbert, I'm trying to bring you up next. Just a moment. I'm getting a few error messages on our Zoom webinar, and it would not surprise me if many people around the world are trying to use Zoom right now to have their public meetings.
And they offered it like a free trial, or right? People can have access.
Free professional for school.
Stand by, Jason. We're still trying here. It's not letting me promote him. Jason, it does not look like we're able to bring you in as a panelist. I'm going to encourage you to leave the webinar and come back. We'll see if we can come back to you in just a moment. All right, Jason has left the webinar. We're going to see if he comes back here. Thanks for everyone's patience. And he's back. I'm sorry, I'm getting the same error message. Jason, if you would like to type something in the comment, I'd be happy to read it as we go here. Jason is thinking about that. Jason Halbert's comment is to please keep the tax rate where it is. And that's all he's going to say. Thank you, Jason.
What do you say?
Keep the tax rate where it is.
Oh, yes. I hear you.
That's it, Mayor Walker.
Okay, thank you. So I'll close the public hearing. Discussion, council?
Remind me the process for this. At some point in time, we had to make a formal decision whether we were going to adjust the rate or not. What was that date again? We know it's open. It's posted. We've kind of already told you we don't want to, but at the same time, when was that closed?
We had to, if we were going to increase the rate, we had to advertise 30 days prior to the public hearing, which is violating past declaration
expressed interest in extending that deadline.
Well, but I think that the tax rate has to be set in stone on April 14th. How we spend it doesn't have to be set in stone until June.
Yes, in terms of getting the tax rate set, the tax bills are due June 5th. Ryan, do you know who would need this money?
The rest of the budget decisions can have more flexibility.
Yeah, you can still make adjustments to that time, but as far as the tax rate, it's going to be set.
Any other comments? All right, moving on next, we have the city manager's proposed budget for fiscal year 2021.
So it's funny being on this side of the mic. Once again, Madam Mayor, members of the council, the public, good evening. Once again, we're going to begin the presentation momentarily. We should have that. Essentially, what this says in terms of what we're going to be discussing tonight while we wait for the system to warm up is to basically recap what we've talked about since the beginning, as well as what we talked about in the last meeting, in terms of what our ultimate goal was, and that was to keep the tax rate at its current rate, which is 95 cents. As was mentioned a few minutes ago, we talked about in terms of the advertisement of it. But the key here is that we do have a set tax rate, and we can make adjustments moving forward in terms of if you want to make some changes with the overall expenditures. But as we've discussed, it's been a lot of time on it, as well as a lot of time with the city council. I think that we should be at a point to move forward because we had those discussions. You want us to go back and look at ways that we can cut and provide more money for expenditures. And just that, we came back with 1.2 million, and the council had the ability to talk about what they wanted to utilize those expenditures. So as we look at the first slide, as we talked about before, just looking at the overall increases from the previous fiscal year. As you can see, our increase from the previous fiscal year, which was an increase of 5.08% FY20, our overall proposed budget is with 4.11%. So as you can see, last year it was at 5%, but we went down actually for FY21. So our proposed budget was 196,625.21. And as I go back to what we talked about before about the overall themes and where we put the money at in the budget, and staying consistent with council's overall mission to look at affordable housing, and then looking at the overall investing in our employees with the COLA, as well as doing the comp study with the year-end revenues that we had, and then also to continue in our tradition of providing funding for schools. And as you look at what we talked about last week was just that, we looked at ways to be able to provide the schools with additional funds for their expenditures. And that's inclusive of the other things that we provide them, as we mentioned before, 40% of the real estate as well as personal property taxes, and then the additional funds that we provide them for the capital projects that they have, and also too, when we talk about the reconfiguration of schools. We did a lot this year, and we want to keep on moving forward in FY21 to talk about our continuing to preserve and enhance the quality of our services that we provide to the public on a day-to-day basis, and being able to have those funding, those dollars in place to be able to do that, but also to overall, as we talked about, and we did different things to look at the organization overall, and to look at where our efficiencies and where we can become more effective as an organization as we provide those day-to-day services. But the main thing is that we wanted to stay consistent with our overall strategic plan and council priorities as we move forward, and we have our future retreats where we're talking more about that as far as the council strategic plan, vision, as well as mission. So I think all those things are tied into this budget and things we need to work on throughout this upcoming fiscal year. One of the other things I want to talk about too is our overall general fund revenues. As you can see, we talked about our tax rate remaining at 95 cents per $100 of assessed value. And as I talked about before, in terms of maintaining that, because as assessments have gone up, you didn't want the real estate tax rate to go up along with that. So we wanted to stay consistent and make sure that we maintain the same tax rate as the previous fiscal year while those assessments did go up. So that's why we propose a 95-cent tax rate. And as you can see, we derive a lot of our money from our local taxes at 73%. And I wanted to give you a pie chart so you can see all the other areas where we generate our revenues from. Our overall expenditures, as you can see, as we broke it down in terms of what we utilize those generated revenues for. And as I mentioned, and as we just talked about, we talked about our overall major budget themes in dealing with the schools. As we look at our overall expenditures, the schools are still the largest portion of our expenditures at 33%. And moving on, you're looking at the amendments to the FY21 proposed budget. My recommendation was 196,625.21. And as we looked at different things to try to increase our overall revenues, when we looked at it, we came back with the $100,000 from the transfer from the parking fund, which moved us to 196,725.21. And as you look at my recommended budget, which was the 196,625.21, and then the amendments to the budget in terms of our overall expenditures, those decreases that we provided you with at the last meeting, this basically showcases that where we were able to get extra revenue from those decreases that we provided, that you requested that we provided you at our last meeting. One of the things that we were able to make an adjustment was because we got some different numbers was the Blue Ridge Juvenile Detention Center. We were able to receive actually $45,176. So that helped out some in terms of having that extra dollars that could go in there in terms of the overall expenditures. When you look at the increase in expenditures, you have the grant match, Contemporary Center of Arts, affordable housing, chat, $200,000 as well as $626,000 for the schools out of the monies that we brought to you at our last meeting. Those total expenditures are, in terms of amendments, over the had before $74,000, which gave us a total of $196,694,612. Now, if you take that $100,000 that was added in, if you take that $74,000 in terms of the overall expenditures, you come out with that $25,000 number. And so that's more us a surplus that you have in terms of what we had with those dollars that were presented to you. Here we have our various dates that we have talked about before. These we can make some adjustments to. Wanted to list those in case we see that we're looking for a quick improvement in terms of this virus going away, so that we can keep on moving forward. So we have those listed dates for you to see as well as for the public to see where we're going to be moving forward and moving on with this budget.
I think it's pretty safe to say, because you're back to retiring. Those first 2 dates are just are not going to be feasible. All within the next 2 weeks, and there's been some pretty sweeping decisions already made around number of people in space.
Would those be things we could do remotely? That same sort of technology, assuming we get it going?
I would like to get more clarification at the state level on whether we can also participate remotely, because I'm not comfortable with us putting staff together and ourselves, and we're already like the outside of that right now.
And I think ensuring that we can have as many citizens participate as possible, which is, so this is new, so we just have to get some kind of campaign, let people know. And then there are people who will use their use of technology. They won't be able to do it, so we just have to be, just cautious and thinking that we can consider those avenues like really different.
I think even the locations, I would say that if we're going to be limiting
We're
this
not
here,
going to the Boys and Girls Club.
I'm saying I think we should be here because it helps our communication staff. It's turnkey. It's here.
Yeah.
We know we're going to limit how many people can be here.
Yeah.
We've already tried it once, so that would be my preference, is to at least know that we're going to make those locations here. We're going to minimize the number of people that would have to be engaged, but at the same time, I'm hopeful that we're going to make some progress with maybe getting permissions to have the council participate remotely if needed. It's outside of the normal 2 times per year, because obviously Councilor McGill's already used her to this last week.
Well, I think
No?
Yeah, they don't. The statute itself for electronic participation, medical reasons are unlimited.
Okay.
Personal reasons are limited. Twice in a calendar year.
I'm not going away for spring break now anyway.
We just hope you're healthy by then.
The other thing, I want to note that I was in a briefing today with Dr. Bonds of the health department, and one of the last things she said to me was, you all on council need to model behavior for the rest of the community.
Yes.
Stop having communal meetings.
And I think we did a really good job. And I know I started talking about this immediately. So I get it. And I'm trying to lead by example from my house.
Yeah.
I think it's important for public to know that these dates are in flux right now until we have a little more clarity, and also just getting through this budget cycle is largely in flux, and I think there's interest in the council just to have that flexibility. Because for me, it's not just about convening, but it's also just, as this landscape change, my view on this budget is evolving. And what's really our priority right now in understanding our revenue pictures, and what are we able to do to help those industries and those individuals who are being hit the hardest. So.
And again, I think it's important for everybody, both council and participating in the webinar and watching it. This is obviously fairly unprecedented in modern Virginia times. That something like this, where we have the state. I know that there was some federal official, I think later in the day today, are asking that no more than 10 people gather in any space, and that does makes it difficult with the way the Freedom of Information Act has worked when you have regular business. Obviously we want to be as transparent and obviously have as much input as possible, but we are taking a look at different options with the state to see what flexibility is possible considering these deadlines. And it's also worth noting, but the council can waive this. Mr. Davidson reminded me, the state requires a budget be passed by June 30th. The city code says by April the 15th. Now, as it's your city code and your budget, you have flexibility to, in effect, waive that deadline. In the city code, you can't waive the state code deadline for June 30th. Again, we can only hope that you know, if first of all, that everyone's safe and healthy, and that this the curve bends significantly to where these restrictions don't last. But if not, we'll have to look at some sort of relief from the state on the Freedom of Information Act and how we can get this budget passed and have the maximum amount of participation.
So that said, let's just say hypothetically we cannot campaign between now and April 15th. How could we allow this flexibility for ourselves so that we're not violating our own state, our own city?
Yes, that's a fair question. I think the Freedom of Information Act does allow telephonic meetings without a physical forum to address the emergency itself. I think you could convene telephonically to address the emergency and state that due to the current declaration of emergency the state's under, we're going to waive our April 15th deadline for passing a budget in the city code. I think that is certainly part and parcel of the emergency itself, is to waive passing the budget on April 15th. It's in the city code, because you do have that flexibility until June 30th in the state code.
You actually have to hear from the public, so I'm going to talk after that. So.
The only thing I have left is basically, the last thing we have left is just the website. As you want to provide the public with the address that they can get to it, as well as we do have copies over
And the now closed library.
So this was done before that. So, that's what I have. Thank you. Talked about a number of things about this whole process. But, as I mentioned before, the time and energy we put into it to be able to get to this point, to be able to look at adopting the budget at that 95% tax rate. For us, that very important. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Now we will open up the public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to speak on the city manager's proposed budget for fiscal year 2021? How many people are here? I have people online.
Good evening, Mayor Walker, Mr. Richardson, members of the council. My name is Jay Jenks. I'm the Assistant Director of the Bridge Ministry Program, which is an 18-month residential program for men dealing with life-controlling issues. And we're a nonprofit agency. We've been serving men dealing with addiction, addictive behavior, homelessness, incarceration, and a total lack of vocational skills or training for over 23 years. Executive Director has been doing it for 3 years. We've invested over $5 million in this community. We've saved our community well over $1 million in monies that would have been spent to incarcerate the men that we've helped to become productive employees, tax-paying citizens in our community. We've done that over this long period of time without support. We have a success rate of 81%. Every single one of our graduates leaves with a career job, often beginning at $16 business relationships that we have as well. Over the last 3 years, just to give you a semblance of the numbers, helping people who are dealing with addiction and incarceration in the community, we have served 48 individuals from the Charleston community in just the last 2 years.
You have an 81% success rate, so that means 39 of those individuals were successful and did not recidivate. If you do the math, because I'm on the top 40 with Mr. Richardson, Walker, the cost that what it takes to incarcerate individuals. If you do the math, if those 39 individuals were incarcerated, program saved our community $2,028,487. If you extrapolate the city's portion, it would have saved the city $1,145,270. That's over a 3-year period. It's just at a place that now we are seeing a need for this that is greater than ever before. We live in a city, ladies and gentlemen, that's 2% of those who are in the job heard the disproportionate. Lastly, we're a minority-owned business. Washington is our founder and executive director, assistant director. We're well equipped to deal with that issue as well as individuals from any background, socioeconomic condition as well. Albemarle is looking into ways that they can support us when they receive this information. Quickly read to you what they said about us. They said that we meet their goal, present local data, describe the need, they demonstrate good understanding of participant strategies to address the identified need. Strategies utilize the best practices, evidence-based practices, and provide a financial benefit. And the program has appropriate strategies. Hopeful you will consider this.
So you all did.
We did. We did. We went through the ADRT process.
Applied to both?
I think we did.
So Vibrant Communities is formerly ADRT.
That was formerly ADRT. The comments I was reading to you.
So the county process is separate.
And do we know, do we receive an application?
And so could you tell us your understanding of the current state of the So you just didn't see the organization.
Yeah, well, it's also.
I have to check.
Recall it correctly, there was an issue. Clarify that and
Because there wasn't, no audit was completed.
that, state, part of the reasoning behind it. I'll have to double check.
Could you just send us an
Yeah.
email? And,
Send
okay.
an email.
Seven.
this point, before we take the, can we break in the middle of the public hearing before we take further comment?
Certainly, council can take a recess when it wants.
Okay.
We have 7 people waiting, and there seems to be an issue with the Zoom webinar.
Okay.
If we could resolve that, that'd be great. We can come back.
So we'll take a 10-minute break.
Thank you.
That's good.
Jason, we're about to start.
All right, I call this meeting back to order.
Okay.
We'll resume the public hearing for the city manager's proposed budget for fiscal year 2021.
And Jason Halbert, you're online with council. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Walker, staff. I appreciate the time. I want to praise you all for holding this meeting at all and under the circumstances. And great job, Brian and the staff, for trying to make this work on the tech end. I do support an extended budget process. I think that's wise given the consideration what's happening. I want to just echo what I've said in the work sessions before. I'm the president of the Fry Springs Neighborhood Association, and just 3 points. One, bringing more transparency to the Budget Development Committee and the process is always a good thing. I hope that Dr. Richardson will continue to take input from the neighborhoods and the neighborhood associations on what their priorities are. We've submitted 3 priorities for the last 3 years, and I'm just going to go into number 1, which is Stribling Avenue. I don't live on Stribling, but I appreciate the stress and the situation there with pedestrians and the traffic. It is a very busy street, and there's consideration for 240 Stribling, which is a huge development at the end of the street, which will add upwards of probably 200 families potentially at the end of that street. And there's really no sidewalks, there's no stormwater infrastructure, and it needs your attention in the CIP. My points, Dr. Richardson, I appreciate zero-based budgeting, and I appreciate that he's going to try to bring a software solution to understanding the queue for projects. We're not trying to be first in line. We just want to know where we are, and we want to eventually get to this project. I'm going to take my neighborhood association hat off and use the rest of my time to just make a plug for emphasizing climate change in going forward, maybe not in this budget, but in future budgets. I would hope to have been in this budget. One major point, the General Assembly just passed a slew of bills, which I've worked on to help with solar, wind, and energy efficiency. There are some items in the budget which are great on energy efficiency. I encourage you to increase those. The city has lagged on solar. The do-it-ourselves approach, the DIY approach to solar on the high school was nice, but right now what you can do with zero upfront cost is the power purchase agreement. That pilot program was extended, increased. There's no barrier now to the city engaging in a power purchase agreement with a third-party vendor. I'm going to email staff and city council exactly step-by-step how you can do that. You can use the existing solar funds in the CIP to do some feasibility analysis and get that done. And I hope you'll do that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, next we're going to bring a new person on. Donna, are you able to speak right now?
Yes, I sure can. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're live with council. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, I'm Donna. I'm Donna Shaughnessy, 1003 Birdwood Road, and I'm speaking to you today not just as a city resident, but as the chair of the local Sierra Club. We're appalled at the lack of funding to address the climate crisis in the budget and urge you to, at a minimum, adopt the recommendations by the Community Climate Collaborative. We cannot wait another year to start tackling this issue. Low-income folks will suffer with increasing hot weather, higher electricity bills, more catastrophic weather events, and increasing medical expenses. We need to take action now to protect everyone. The city was such a pioneer in adopting the climate goal back on July 1st and has fallen far behind in the meantime. A goal without implementation is worthless. 8 months have gone by and nothing has happened. The climate action plan has stalled, starved by bare bones staffing, while the county is surging forward with over $500,000 budgeted for climate initiatives. They just released their draft plan last week after an extensive public participation effort. The Sierra Club collaborated in the public meetings, and some of our suggestions have been incorporated. Charlottesville should be a leader in this effort. Our failure to move forward has implications not just for us, but for other smaller communities who look to us for guidance. Thank you.
Okay, next we're going to bring on Emily Little via her telephone. Emily, you're on with City Council. You've got 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Emily Little. I live at 807 Moore Ave. Good evening, councilors. Thank you for, first of all, declaring a state of emergency for Charlottesville and what you're doing and sacrificing to keep all of us safe here in Charlottesville and beyond. Tonight, I am thinking a lot about the nurses at UVA and Martha Jefferson, the caregivers at assisted living centers like Trinity Mission, the daycare teachers making hard decisions, the parents who are home with their kids, and the many people who are losing their paychecks and their sense of stability in their lives. The coronavirus pandemic is giving us a window into what it looks to shift our lives when there is a major change in our safety status. Climate change is going to do the exact same thing to us that the coronavirus is doing to us now. It is going to shift our lives because we won't have the same level of safety or security. Climate change will get worse, and because we are not ready as a city and we are not doing enough work to work against it, it will change our lives and especially the lives of our children and our grandchildren. Charlottesville, I'm really proud to say, set these amazing greenhouse gas emissions goals in this past year, and yet now the first budget after these goals has no money going to work to meet these goals, and in fact has money coming away from making the city walkable and bikeable, so making it more of a driving city and driving up the carbon emissions. How are we going to have the resiliency to face these changes if we do not invest in it now? I'm asking that the City Council change the direction of the future of the city by giving money in the budget to support real action against the climate change crisis that we face. Please strengthen the city's environmental sustainability division. Susan Elliott is doing an incredible job, but she's doing more work than she should. She should have people supporting her. Albemarle has a new position posted to do just that for them. Incentivize cleaner, more efficient, and more equitable energy consumption patterns. I want the city to incentivize cleaner, more efficient, and more equitable transportation system. And I want the city to ensure that climate is a priority criteria for key decision making in the city by creating a real panel of experts that could support how Charlottesville can take action on climate change. We are so blessed in Charlottesville to have so many experts and to have so many people with knowledge about how we can do this and do this well. If we are slow in our prevention of climate action, it will be the people who are keeping us safe right now during the coronavirus that will make the sacrifices again and will make them even bigger when it comes to climate change. It will be nurses, it will be caregivers, it will be teachers, it will be parents, and most of all, it will be women. Women who are sacrificing a lot right now will be the same women who will be sacrificed when it comes to climate change getting worse. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
So for the webinar folks, we have 4 of you that have raised your hand that we're going to go to next. Right now it appears I can most easily bring in your audio, so I'm going to do that. And Peter Krebs is next, followed by Walt Heineke, Jennifer Phillips, then Lisa Torres. Peter, you're online with City. You would mute your
Can
speaker.
you hear me okay?
Go ahead.
Can you hear me at all? Hello?
Peter, go ahead.
Hello?
Hello, Peter, go ahead.
Okay, great. I'm going to mute my speaker and then speak. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I appreciate that you are finding ways for people to participate without entering a crowded city hall space. I know many of other people are grateful for this opportunity as well. Before I begin my public comments, and by the way, I'm Peter Krebs. I live at 1022 Tufton Avenue. Before I begin my comments, I'd like to remind everyone to take good care of yourselves. Eat right, get rest, exercise, and plenty of fresh air. Be there for one another as best you can. We humans are social creatures who require contact in order to thrive. This is going to be a long struggle, and we need to be there for each other, full strength for the long haul. It's not a sprint. The substance of my comments should be familiar to you. I request that you adjust the CIP funding in 3 specific accounts: new sidewalks, bicycle infrastructure, and trail development, at least to levels consistent with previous years. The Planning Commission and many others have suggested that they actually be increased, and I agree with them. The city has made ambitious and properly so goals for addressing climate change. These cannot be met unless we change the way people get around town, and that requires safe places to walk, ride a bike, and access to transit. Sidewalks connect people to resources in places like Elliott Avenue and Rugby Road. The bicycle budget will be used for improvements like ones you will soon be seeing on Monticello Avenue. And the trails account will be used to connect kids who live in Greenstone to Tonsler Park, as well as larger efforts like you're seeing along the 250 bypass. This moment we are facing, in which there is a climate crisis, public health is at the front of everyone's mind, and people need places to breathe, is not the time to scale back our investments in infrastructure for safe, healthful, and restorative walking and biking connectivity. Please return these 3 bicycle pedestrian spending accounts at least to historic levels. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up is Walt Heineke. Walt, you've got 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Thanks. And thanks again for allowing us to speak this way and going out of your way for making these hearings available to the public. I wanted to talk about the budget in 2 ways. First, on expenditures. As you all know, we're on a journey to solve the affordable housing crisis in Charlottesville. We're about somewhere between 3,500 and 4,000 units short. And we started last year with a good commitment to putting $10 million into the Affordable Housing Fund. And I just wanted to make sure that when we drill down this year, that we're going to see another $10 million in that in a commitment to affordable housing. That's reflected in the CIP, the CAF programs like the tax abatement program and programs like the CHAP program. So that when all is done and said, that we're going to find $10 million again to address the affordable housing crisis in town, especially for those that are below 50% of area median income. So I'm just hoping that we're going to see a commitment in total of about $10 million again this year, because as you know, the housing study has shown that it's going to take about $150 million over 10 years to get this thing solved. And I think we're seeing some solid results from last year's $10 million. So I'm hoping that we'll get that commitment again. On the revenue side, at a previous meeting, I brought up the idea or the thought or the possibility that we may be subsidizing corporate and private accounts in our parking structures. And I'm wondering if anybody's checked into that, and if there's some possibility of getting some revenue back for the budget this year. I've heard estimates of up to somewhere around 300,000 to 400,000 in revenue that we may be losing by subsidizing parking spaces. On that same note on parking, I saw an automated counter for the 2 parking garages this week, and it looks like we're about even at peak times, we're about 50 spaces available in Market Street and up to 100 spaces available in Water Street. And I'm wondering if you might take a look at that again to see if we might figure out a way to postpone putting funds into building a new garage over where Guadalajara is. Lastly, on your agenda tonight is some update from New Hill. And I see that New Hill has sort of changed their plans from an area plan to a vision plan. And I'm wondering if you put 500,000 into from the equity fund into that project. And I'm wondering if they're changing the scope of that project, if we're going to see any return on possible revenue. In other words, can we take some of that revenue from the 500,000 that you initially proposed? And if they are narrowing their scope of what they're going to be delivering, can we use some of that money toward affordable housing this year? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up will be Jennifer Phillips, followed by Lisa Torres. And if anyone else would like to raise their hand, it seems to be working in audio only mode, so we'll keep doing that. So happy to take any other participants in the public hearing. Jennifer, you're live with City Council. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, thank you. My name is Jennifer Phillips, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I am not a city resident, but my spouse has proudly served the city of Charlottesville in the fire department for more than 20 years. I come to you tonight in the midst of this public health crisis that is facing this city, our nation, and the world. This is nothing like anything we have ever seen before. While you are asking the majority of the city employees to stay home and not come to work, our first responders are not only reporting to work, but also required to work mandatory overtime to meet minimal staffing needs. Our firefighters and first responders are on the front lines caring for the citizens of this city with no regard to their own welfare and that of their families, whom they may expose just by coming home from work. I am disappointed to see no increase in the budget for public safety. We are entering a crisis that may well continue into the summer, and the pressure and stress this will put on our first responders could be unprecedented. The time is now for you to take a long, hard look at the staffing and resources our firefighters need to do their jobs taking care of this community. The city manager spoke earlier about the goals of taking care of the city employees and improving the services provided by the city. This can only be accomplished by providing the funding needed to support hiring more firefighters for the fire department. They are here to take care of you. Now it's your turn to take care of them. I also have one other request. Please, if you see any of our first responders out there, please provide them the respect they deserve and the gratitude they have earned for the services they are providing. They are literally putting their lives at risk and sacrificing times with their families for this city and its citizens. Thank you.
Next up is Lisa Torres. Lisa, you're on with City Council. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor Walker, councilors, our city manager, Dr. Richardson. I am a city resident, parent, and one of our city school board members. Thank you for the opportunity to provide public comment via Zoom. This option is much appreciated. I have tried to attend and follow each of your budget work sessions this year so far. I appreciate your time, effort, and ongoing process to work through this with the ultimate goal of taking care of our Charlottesville community. I realize there are still many decisions you have to make, and I felt it crucial to come to you tonight to speak again on behalf of the Charlottesville City Schools. The school board has worked very hard to prioritize and support changes within the school division to address the many inequities brought to light over the last couple of years. The implementation of these changes are long overdue. The process, not an easy one sometimes, and the conversations and journey not always comfortable. But it is imperative that we continue this work, that we do our part to continue to push and dismantle the systemic racism embedded within the school and other systems. And the schools want to do our part. The superintendent's proposed budget, the budget that our board approved, is one that will support this continued work. We are dependent on you, City Council, to fund and support us in this work. Historically, there is the 40% formula that the city has used as a base of financial support each year. And we all know that the graphs that you have shown throughout your presentations, that 40% hasn't been enough. I do know that the county uses something closer to 60% for their funding formula. We are grateful for the 2.1 million and the roughly 626,000 you all mentioned last week, but I need you to know, and I need the community to know, that this still leaves us with approximately a 1.2 million funding gap for the 2020-2021 budget. Please continue to consider fully funding and prioritizing our request. Our awesome students deserve this. Our incredibly hardworking teachers who are now going once again above and beyond to organize and establish online learning options for the students. They deserve this raise and so much more. And a quick, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you to all of the teachers, staff, parents, community members, and partners who scrambled to get lunches and food out today and ongoing throughout the next weeks or days. These tough times really challenge us all, and this community definitely showed up. Thank you again for all that you do.
Thank you. Next up is Tanisha Hudson. Tanisha, you're on with City Council. You have 3 minutes.
Hello. I just wanted to say during the last budget meeting last Thursday in City Space, you know, Heather was really big on process. And while we're always so keen on process for nonprofits and developers or whatever, whoever else comes here and do whatever they want to do, we need to have a process for the people who are not making living wages. The COVID-19 is really going to affect low-income individuals. Also, people who have the temporary housing vouchers. Some of those people are supposed to move out. Like they had 1-year vouchers or 2-year vouchers. They're going to have to move out. We're putting people in a worse situation at this point. And I just feel like, you know, we should focus on a process for people who don't have it at this point. You know, like maybe assure that people gas or utilities won't be cut off. Assure that if people are late paying their taxes due to this, because a lot of people are about to lose their jobs, especially the UVA workers. You know, some people aren't reporting to work in certain departments. They've already shut down stuff, especially like the cafeteria workers, people that work at O'Hill or the different dining halls up at UVA. You guys are cutting hours. Like jobs are really doing, you know, shutdowns at this point. I think safety is absolutely first. I just want to piggyback off the lady for the that made the comment about the fire department. While I love and respect the fire department for what they do, we do have other people that can do what they do as well. We have ambulatory services all throughout the city of Charlottesville. I don't think that we're going to have that many fires during the COVID-19, but I think we need to just focus on moving the money at this point. Stop funding nonprofits at this point. McGuffey don't need any money. I mean, it's a bunch of people that don't need money. Schools, healthcare, and affordable housing should definitely be at the top of the list at this point, considering what we're facing. We just really need to sit back and think about how this is going to affect everyone, but how it's really going to push poor people back even further. Thank you guys, and I hope you guys stay safe, and I hope y'all have some Lysol spray and wipes. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Mayor Walker, that concludes the comments from the public here.
Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Nope. Checking. All right. Any council discussion? I have a lot of things to say, but I really need some class, so I don't want to. Make sure that I am learning enough to meet my confidence, and I'm not tonight, so I'm going to make it. Thank you so much for this right now. This is great for me.
And I'll reiterate what I've said at other work sessions. I understand what's not in this budget, but just speaking to council, I think climate change really needs to be one of the top priorities in the budget. It is a little disappointing that we were the first locality in Virginia to set emissions reduction target, and Albemarle is ahead of us on one. We had a staff member for that to fulfill that goal, as well as having $500,000 fund just for climate change related projects. As one of the public comments was made, we're thinking about how this COVID crisis is changing some of our systems and how we operate as a city, as a community. In 20 to 30 years, if not before that, climate change is going to be having that same kind of effect, even larger. Thinking about shocks to our supply chain networks, our food supply, migration patterns, people moving from the Virginia Beach area because localities are flooding. So it's something that we have to need to plan for and invest in as a top priority for thinking of that 20-30-year time horizon. I agree with you, Councilor Hill, that this budget process is really hard to think through now because the government side revised GDP production for quarter two is negative 5% growth, which is going to put a wrench in everything in terms of our revenue projections and upend how, if that prediction comes true, how, not just this budget cycle, but the next one as well. And so it's just sort of, for me, it's hard to think through the impacts of how those changes we're going to do at this point, but we know it's coming.
I think, that's something that at least since maybe the first year of being on council, that staff has been trying to get us to understand just, unknowns. When unknowns pop up, how do we handle those? So that's a conversation that we have to continue to have. I am looking forward to the work session, the climate change work session, because one thing that I want to, make sure of is that we have a balance between that work and making sure that we are not, cutting off like support to day-to-day survival needs, which is very important also. And so I had a third thought. Oh, there's been a lot of comparison to what the county is doing, but there are a lot of areas that the county is not supporting the way we are, like affordable housing. And so, and we're supporting, much greater dollars than $500,000 and a staff. So that's also somewhere to consider, like just the priorities. We know it's important, and just trying to figure out how to balance it in. Because again, we're back to the same discussion about you can't do everything. So what are you going to do, and how to fit into, fit everything in and prioritize it, and hopefully that is something that whenever we have the strategic, what is it? Strategic session?
The retreat. Strategic planning.
We need some rest. Strategic retreat that we will be able to, really align this and put all of this into perspective.
And I would agree. I think in the climate planning, I think it's large sections of the climate movement are trying to make this a top priority, is connecting issues of climate justice to economic and racial justice, thinking about the connection between, say, utility bills and housing affordability, the history of affordable housing traditionally being built in floodplains, et cetera. But I will always underline, when we're talking about priorities, climate change is life on this planet. The UN's reports show if nothing changes, at a minimum hundreds of millions and probably over 1 billion climate refugees, shocks for the ability of countries to have stable access to food and other things like that.
And that's why
Which will
I'm-
break down our own existing inequalities.
Yes, but you have to, if you read even our local map to health report, there are life expectancy is, in the last report, because I haven't been able to read this one, 11 years difference between downtown and the Ridge Street neighborhoods, and that's primarily impact Black community members. So linking them together is good, but also you have to look at, and that's what I'm hoping that we are able to do. That's why I'm looking forward to the work session. You have to understand that you have to look at the climate change holistically. A lot of, I know it's linked and racial impact is discussed, but a lot of Black people feel left out of that conversation, and they feel as if people are telling them what it looks like for them. And so my concern for Black and brown people is that they are brought to the forefront of a conversation that they have lived for years. And I tell people often, my grandmother, Louisa County, land, garden, smokehouse, animals, like all of the things that we talk about today to get back to, grew your food, raise the animals, all of that. And in terms of limiting carbon emissions, we had all of that down pat. Didn't drive and was walking. So people have been doing it for a lot of years, and some people had to do it their whole lives. But really, when those links, what I want to make sure of is when those links are put together, that it's actually the voice of the community. They're not being talked at. They are really included in this conversation.
One thing I just wanted to say to address a couple of comments, and I've said this in other contexts, I sort of want to say it again in this context, that we've been asked a number of times over the last few weeks and months to subscribe to or to underwrite some new initiatives in some areas. For example, the climate change initiative is just one. We've also been asked to consider adding more firefighters and things like that. Those are two discussions that I really hope we will have in a serious way, but not during the budget season. It's very hard for us to figure that stuff out during the budget season. And what we need to do is come up with a broader plan. And the work session on climate change may be a good time to start some of that discussion, but it's really hard to start that discussion right now in terms of trying to figure out how much money we ought to, the request has been made that we set aside that money while we try to figure out what we might do with it, which is a terrible way to look at it when the school system, for example, is saying, we already know what we want to do with it. We've got a plan. And we're going to say to the schools, I know you've got a plan, and yes, you've got a need, but we're going to put that money over here instead to where there is no plan yet. And I hope we will be a part. I'm looking forward to being a part of a planning process that will take place, maybe over the summer, maybe into the fall, whatever, but in plenty of time so that it can get into the budget next year with a good plan, with forethought, with all of the having bought into it in the way that we want them to buy into it.
And I think what Councilor Michael
Payne. You are
what he's saying is that these were dollars that were in the budget previously. That's one of the questions. So that's back to the retreat, is if you set a priority, then they should always be funded, and then we fund everything else out of what's left, is what I'm hoping that we eventually get to, so that we know what is mandatory and then what are those other things we want to review and consider during the cycle each year.
I do have one other question for a couple of budget people here. Do I recall that there is some reserve that we have basically against an economic downturn?
Yes. Oh, you didn't ask me.
Well, or is it? And if so, how much is in it, and what are the circumstances under which we would tap into it?
We have a 17% fund balance policy that we maintain. 3% of that is what is called an economic downturn. The way the policy is written, however, is that our revenues have to be down overall 1.5% before we can even touch it. And then if we do, it has to be replenished within 3 years. So right now, roughly 1.5%, our revenues would have to be down 2.8 million and some change before we could even think about using it. And also, it's basically happens at year end. So it's not a source of funds per se to address the economic downturn. The better way would be is if we are concerned about that is to start looking on the expenditure side and finding ways to either delay or start to think about what expenditures could be cut or held back until we see how all of this fares.
I mean, one of the reasons I ask, I mean, I know it's basically a protection against what would work out to be, say, $2.8 billion downturn at a time when we're looking. Oh, let's say we've got 4 more months of revenues left in the fiscal year, when our lodging and meals taxes bring in on average $1.5 million a month. It wouldn't take that unforeseeable. I mean, it is foreseeable given the current issues that we could have that kind of a downturn, and we could have that kind of a downturn. Now, interestingly, I suppose the question would be what happens if part of that downturn occurs in one fiscal year and part of it in another fiscal year. But still, the point is, I wanted to know what our funds were that were available for that purpose. The other issue that has been raised, and we talked about it earlier, was the question of whether we could say to restaurants, okay, we know you all have collected that tax money, you can use it to pay your staff. And I think we've agreed that no, under both Virginia law and on local law, you can't do that. But I gather that there has been a proposal in places like Michigan, for example, to have what amounts to a tax amnesty for meals taxes and so on, which would, I'm assuming, I haven't thought about it deeply, but I'm assuming would not be illegal. Whether it's wise is a different question, but at least it wouldn't be illegal.
So just 2 comments. One is correct in terms of your summary of the meals and lodging. One thing to keep in mind, though, they are delayed. So what we are collecting in March is really for the prior month.
Right.
The other thing we already know is because of the real estate assessments and with our current projections with personal property, they are projecting to be over budget. So based on, again, just really quick math, some really, pie in the sky projections with our revenue team, we really think that probably 20 is going to be okay. It's really 21 where we're going to get the impact, and that's what we just don't know.
Okay, that's good to know. And what that basically would mean is that the amount of money that we often have available to allocate in December, we may not have available to allocate in December, but at least we won't be in trouble.
And all of these sources, all of the big 6, big 7 sources that we talked to you about, they're all trending up until this point. They're all trending ahead. So we have a little room there as well.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I guess it's an unknown, but huge implication for new expenditures that will be ongoing, what that means for the next upcoming budget cycle.
Oh, thank you. So is there any, that was it? All right, public comment. We were at council discussion.
I'm still here.
Okay.
I don't have anything new to add. I can't find any money anywhere.
Okay. All right. Well, with that one.
No, we've got
No,
We have other
with this, 3.
Oh, I thought you said that.
No. I will tell you, I don't sound this sleeping well. I had to drink some lavender tea. Help me relax. Okay, so now we have other business. What happened? Ready.
Would you like me, I'll give just a brief overview of these items. Good evening, Mayor Walker and council. This is sort of where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, with what's going on nationally and internationally with COVID-19. There are some actions that department heads have come up with in the past couple of days that they're asking for council to consider tonight. The first is that the Haven operates a shelter at 112 West Market Street. There was a special use permit granted in February of 2007. There are conditions that are attached to that special use permit, which limits its hours of operation. Before you, there is a resolution that is just for the duration of the city manager's emergency declaration, which would negate the conditions that are attached to that special use permit, and that would allow the Haven to possibly serve as a shelter during the duration of this emergency. And Khaki Demick, the head of Human Services, is requesting it. I think this is due to some correspondence the council has received from Pachin that they may not be able to fulfill their sheltering needs due to the COVID-19 crisis right now. And so this is an option that Ms. Demick came up with as the idea, again, just for the duration of the emergency, allowing possibly the Haven to serve as a shelter. And the way that would happen is for the council to pass a resolution which would, again, remove the conditions of the special use permit.
Is there a motion?
So this is a two-part thing, so make sure.
Right. Now, do you just want to move to remove the conditions from the?
So I move that we remove the conditions from the special use permit granted on February 5th, 2007, effective upon the adoption, and continue until city council discontinues the local state of emergency dated March 20th, 2020.
Second.
The only question I have is should we add in there that they could use it for this purpose pursuant to agreement with the city of Charlottesville or something? I want to make sure that it's not just sort of, hanging out there loose, that they're going to do it with us.
Yes, if you want to make an amendment to that and to have the condition also read, to have the resolution also read that the conditions are suspended upon an agreement between the city of Charlottesville and the Haven.
I thought we were doing it now.
I'll just say I won't support that because I want just maximum flexibility and not needing for us to potentially need to take a vote at some point when that will just equal less time for them to respond flexibly.
I'd say it's got to be by agreement with city council, that with, even with Ms. Dimick. I just want to have somebody, I want to have the knowledge that somebody from the city is going to be sort of supervising the conditions on which they end up going into this operation that violates the agreement that we had with them when they first got set up.
So I think the reason why they're asking, we're talking about a very vulnerable population of citizens, and these are the Pacham and the churches associated with them are the groups that have signed up to take, to help make sure that their needs are met. And I would just want to trust that process, that the reason that they're asking us to do this is, again, the churches are concerned about mitigating the spread of the virus in any way. There was talk about the fact that I think Councilor McGill, that their daycare centers are a lot of these churches, and so if they decide to use this as one of the sites and are able to do that, I don't want them to have to run all the plans by us. I think at any point, if we hear something that's out of line, that we could say something. But I would be concerned about that, especially with how busy everyone is. And I know a lot of that came with the concern of just even that location being where it was, right? And that people were fearful, and I just don't agree with the extra monitoring.
I guess looking at, actually, I have another question. Mr. Blair, do you know, is there any other condition for the special use permit, or is that the only condition?
There were 4 separate conditions for it. If you have 1 second, I can pull those up for you.
The way this is worded, we're saying they can operate without regard to the special use permit conditions.
So you
Right,
just
and there
put that
were-
provision.
I just want to know what the provision, certainly limiting to that provision would help. Maybe if we get the exact language, we would know. And we may know from that whether my concern is at all a valid concern. I would say that it could be interpreted, for example, that if we decide, if we were to approve the waiver, that somebody could decide that this was going to be a quarantine facility. Now, that may be a valid purpose, but I think it's a decision that the city government ought to have some say over, as to whether it's going to be just a place for the homeless to sleep as they have been sleeping at various churches around town, or whether we're turning it into a quarantine facility.
I don't think that would be their purpose, but there are rooms in the building that if they needed to have, individuals, just like you would quarantine yourself in your bedroom, that they would be able to do it. I wouldn't see an issue.
I just want to make sure that the city is going to be aware of the plan, has the ability to influence the implementation of the plan. And I'm not sure that I want to say, yes, we're going to grant a waiver without any oversight.
Still pulling it up. I do remember the one condition is it's available from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. That's one of the conditions. But going through the council records, it was an 07 special use permit.
But that's the only one they've asked, right?
Well, we have all 4 conditions, and they were to remove all 4. They did relate to the operation, but again, if you can just give me 1 second, I will read those for you.
And what is the underlying zoning of that property?
Gosh, East Market. Would that be downtown?
First block of West.
it is. There are 4 conditions. Operation of the shelter shall be limited to hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Overnight accommodations will not be provided. That was the second condition. The third condition says, except for related office and storage uses, the operation of the shelter is limited to the lower or basement level of the premises. And the fourth condition was the primary entrance to the shelter facility will be located on Market Street.
Okay. I think we don't need to worry about the fourth condition. I haven't thought about the structure of the building to know about the third, but certainly the first and the second seem to have to be modified or waived.
And was there a reason why they couldn't use the third provision?
Reading and hearing about the history of it, downtown businesses and others did not want a homeless shelter, period, on the downtown mall. And so in order for them to create the haven, they wanted to limit the ability to use it as an overnight homeless shelter. And I think that helped assure them that that couldn't ever happen. Because that second level was the sanctuary, and you have more area to like lay out beds or other things like an overnight shelter.
But I was there a couple of weeks ago. You were there, Heather, and people were napping in that area. Right.
Yes.
While they were waiting for the program to start or whatever. So I think they should be able to. So 1 through 3, right? You know,
I would
think all
suggest
of
1
them
through
suspended
3.
are fine. And sorry, go ahead, Councilman McGinn.
Just having worked in the building and stuff, I would suggest at least 1 through 3. Because if necessary, the upstairs offices can be turned into like shelter. On there's the basement floor, the first floor, the second floor, the third floor. So the second floor, I don't know what's there right now. But that could potentially be a women's shelter, while the men's shelter was either in the sanctuary or downstairs.
okay, so we're going to put in provisions amended for.
Okay. 1, 2, and 3.
So the motion even is hereby granted permission to operate without regard to the special use permit conditions 1, 2, and 3
That's what it sounds like.
that were granted on February 5th, 2007. So that's my revised motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
I gather that nobody else has any concerns.
I just want to give them additional administrative burdens for them at this moment. So
Or for the city.
Support it.
Didn't hear that, Sina.
I said, or adding more administrative burdens to the city right now either.
Except that I think they're already involved in the discussions. So I'm not sure what additional burdens are being suggested. I simply want to make sure that if we had, of course, the special use permit was developed by and passed with a great deal of public discussion, and for us to, without even giving notice to any of the neighbors, that we are just sort of eliminating these provisions that were so much a product of discussion 13 years ago, I at the very least think that the city ought to take some responsibility for making sure that we as a city government is comfortable with the direction in which it's being used.
It's not related to this vote, and I recognize that. But I think when we look at the history of the origin of the SCP and the impact it's had on this population and the ability to serve this population, I just think longer term, thinking about the wisdom and impact of that SCP is worth revisiting as a city, recognizing that there's not relevant to this discussion.
With public input from the neighbors, the people who expressed themselves 13 years ago, or without it?
So I think we can say that we would have the same discussions. It's, that we would have I mean, the economic climate, the downtown minus that area is pretty much the same. I know at this point, our citizens who would use that space, use the library, they're unable to use the library. The city is being asked to consider using our rec centers. This can be accommodated at the Haven. There are already members of city staff who would be involved in this process, and I think right now it's with the nature of this virus and all the unknowns that it's more important for us to ensure that they are as safe as possible versus meeting the needs of the neighbors in the area.
I'm not asking that we meet the needs of the neighbors in the area. I'm simply asking that the city, which has set out these conditions, rather than simply waiving the conditions completely and saying we don't care how you go about this process, that the city exercise oversight, which is apparently already happening. I won't belabor the point any further. I gather I'm going to be out.
Any further discussion? All right. Please vote.
Yes.
Carries 5-0.
Okay, the next thing we have, that the Commissioner of the Revenue approached our office today was the rent relief application in the city code, and it is stated as May 1st. Commissioner Divers is requesting an emergency ordinance. Again, that would need 4/5 of the council to approve it to extend the deadline for elderly and disabled individuals to submit applications and affidavits to the city for rent relief program from May 1st to June 1st of 2020. And that was his request based on, again, I think the uncertainty of either people are unable to make the deadline depending on how long social distancing measures are.
So I move that we adopt the ordinance extending the deadline for elderly and disabled individuals to submit applications pursuant to Charlottesville City Code Section 225-29. Yes, that's where I was reading from.
Oh, any discussion?
Yes.
All right, that carries 5-0. Next.
All right. And then there is another request for an emergency ordinance. Again, it has to be passed for the city council for fifth council on the day of construction. What it says in effect is for the remainder of Dr. Richardson's emergency declaration, mandatory review periods that are less than 60 days, those timelines are going to be waived. Because if they're not, then, for instance, certificates of appropriateness and other site plans, there are certain deadlines in the city code, 60 days. If staff or boards and commissions don't act upon them, in effect, they're deemed approved. This could, in fact, depending on the process, there may not be time for consideration. We just don't know at this point. So this ordinance is an attempt to effectively make sure that documents such as site plans or Board of Architectural review applications actually get reviewed and deemed approved VAR or staff is unable to complete the process.
Adopt the ordinance extending the mandatory review periods.
Discussion.
Yes.
All right, that carries 5-0.
Finally, there was a resolution brought up at your last session, March 12th, and Councilor Smook, I discussed with them wanted to pass a resolution with the Councilor Miguel indicate they did concerning insulin medication, and urging the governor to sign the legislation that's passed both houses at Virginia General Assembly.
I would move that motion, the resolution asking Governor Northam to sign HB 66. Let me say that this actually has the potential, if not passed, to mess up a number of things that the city is involved with. And so this is not, as I've said before, it's not simply a matter of, gee, I hope I'm making a resolution that somebody else go do something that has no impact for us. It has some impact for some of the citizens and some of these things we carry out our administrative health functions. I make the motion.
I second.
Has support for this policy. I think we've got a pretty good chance of succeeding.
Yes.
Is there any other, now we have to open matters.
Really quick, I just want to say, Mr. Blair, we're here. You don't know when we'll be here. Anything else you should be figuring out, deciding on, voting on?
Oh, yeah, because we can stay till 12.
No, I'm just saying, we're here. And I'm just not sure when we'll have this opportunity.
That's a fair question, but again, and I do want to give compliments to Ms. Robertson, Ms. Denver, Commissioner Divers. These are folks, the NDS staff, really did over the weekend, I think about like the true practical logistical issues that arose, and they came to our office today. We've all been working to get this before you.
To all of our staff.
Again, I'm definitely there are probably a lot of things that need to happen. I'm definitely interested in exploring what we can do. Utility shutdowns, evictions, payments from city properties and other things. Because I think, again, in 2 to 3 weeks from now, we're going to be some pretty severe economic impacts, health, public health impacts. And we just need to be unified as a community. A lot of a lot will be mutual in the community. We're doing the work, but we just need to continue to unify from whatever we can in the next several weeks.
I would add that I hope that folks will understand that in this respect, although we have our own declaration of an emergency, we're really operating under the governor's declaration of emergency. And so the exercise of emergency powers by the city manager as authorized by state law is subject to the control of the governor. So when people say, well, why doesn't Charlottesville just charge off and go do things that we want to have done because it's an emergency? The answer is because it's still got to come through the governor for the most part.
There are some things.
There are, but I think one thing that's probably fair to say is both at the federal and state level, it's a good idea. The more centralized in terms of decision making and applicability across the state for the nation. There are, like there are certain provisions.
But especially with our like utility. Something.
Sure. And the tax amnesty that is also
I think we're just in the unfortunate situation of make sure that leadership is not going to be we've got to take it on ourselves.
Have a great 15-day plan. Getting started. So we have someone to participate in matters of
We do. Mayor Walker, Marcia Guy is on the line. And Marcia, you have 3 minutes with council.
I don't need 3 minutes. One thing, the state today decided that there will be no billing, no shutoff for utility services of any kind. That's what the SPC. I'm sorry, my alphabet soup for who can do that is a little scrambled. But I know I saw that news. So that doesn't affect rents, but for utilities, the state has spoken. Secondly, I ask you to, for climate change, put it in perspective. You know that when there is a climate emergency, it hurts lower income people, the people with the fewest ability, least ability to cope, get hit the hardest. So, and you've got in the city's budget, you've got something like a $100,000 problem here. It's not $1 million, $100,000. To my mind, it's one position and possibly half of a second position. If you would share, the county and the city would share one position to do the checking on GHG that's supposed to be reported every 2 years. That's not a full-time job for somebody for 2 years, but it could be shared between the two entities.
No, I got it.
So it's a little problem and you could solve it if you wanted to. Sorry, I don't know why you're laughing at me.
Zoom call.
Okay, well, I said what I had to say.
So there was a interference that kind of startled us a bit. So that was our response to that, not your comments.
I just want to clarify real quickly that there's no law from the federal government that suspends electricity shutoffs for Dominion